Good morning, everybody. Welcome and thank you for joining us this morning. Just before I move off this holding slide, actually, there's a URL down the bottom there. If you're not already part of our MIP AIP community, please do have a look. It's a Yammer group. It's heavily active from both the product group side as well as our user base and community. So if you've got any questions after today or in general around information protection at Microsoft, that's a really good place to have a look, see if the answers have already been provided, and if not, ask your question. So thank you for joining us today. Let's get the slides to move. There we go. My name is Adam Bell. I'm a program manager on the Microsoft Information Protection and Compliance Customer Experience Engineering team. You can see why we use acronyms, quite a long group there. In M365 Security Engineering. I've worked with Azure Information Protection for some time now, and there's a lot of conversation now around this thing, Microsoft Information Protection. So today's session really is to try and address the broad landscape of information protection as we have it at Microsoft, this thing called unified labeling, what it is, why it's important to you if you're looking at information protection or currently using information protection within your organization. So we have a lot of development going on in this space at Microsoft currently. There's a lot of changes, and we can appreciate that all this change is generating a bit of confusion with some of our customers. So today's session really is to help try and clarify some of that. We'll talk about some of the common pain points that our team hears about, and hopefully we can provide some guidance on what you can do to move forward over the course of this year. We will always make our deck available after the session, and it is being recorded. So we will let you know at the end of the session or follow up after this where you can get your hands on those. So today's agenda. We'll start by a quick level set on recent developments in information protection. We'll talk about what we're working with roadmap, both what we've delivered recently and what we're focusing on in the coming half year at least. And we'll move on to providing some guidance around what this means for you, how to adopt the latest features as we release them. So obviously you don't want to be too far behind the curve if you can help that. And then we'll finish off with some Q&A at the end. Now, do feel free to ask your questions as we go through. You've got the chat window there. We've got a bunch of the team on the call, so they will answer as much as we can as we go through. And after this, we're actually going to produce an FAQ. We did a North America webinar on Monday. We've got the EMEA one this morning. We're going to combine all those common questions, and we're actually going to document that up on the website. So hopefully it can help going forward as well. Before we go too far, I do want to take a few minutes just to try and address some terms that seem to be generating some confusion with our customers. Hopefully we can clarify this. So we've got 4 terms on the page. We have the first 2, which are add-ins for Office on Windows. We have AIP Classic Client, and we have the AIP Unified Labeling Client. Now, the AIP Classic Client is the new name for the client that we've had all along under AIP. The name is deliberate. We're trying to discourage our customers from adopting this client at this time, and I'll explain more around that as we go through today's session. The main thing to bear in mind for this is there's no new features planned, and this plugin or this add-in is effectively in maintenance mode, and we do expect to sunset this during 2021, and I'll talk a little bit more of that as we go through. Now, the AIP Classic Client has its label configuration and its policies all managed, is performed in the Azure portal, and that's an important distinction, and we'll touch on that. We've got the Unified Labeling Client. So this is a newer client. It's built from the ground up on the MIP SDK. We had the first version was released last year. Label and policy management for this client is performed in the Security and Compliance Center, not the Azure portal. And that's an important distinction, which hopefully you'll see as we go through. Since the August update last year, the Unified Labeling add-on is on about 90% feature parity with AIP Classic Client. And that's super important to you guys, because what we've done in the product group is we've looked at the usage of the features, and we've focused our priority on ensuring that the most heavily used features in the Classic Client we've made available in the Unified Labeling Client. And what we're seeing is for the majority of our customers, there's nothing holding them on that Classic Client today, right? So that you've got the ability to move forward and move to the Unified Labeling Client. And we'll talk on why you want to do that and the pros and cons as we move forward. And we've got Unified Labeling, which can be a bit confusing. That term, and I'll talk more about the mechanics of this, but that term in principle is when we're saying that the admin activities for your label management and your policy configuration are all done in the Security and Compliance Center, or SCC. And the main advantage of doing that is that you can take advantage of all the new features that we release, either across platform or across the service itself. And the last phrase is MIP, or Microsoft Information Protection. This isn't a product per se. You can't go out and buy that. There's no SKU. When we talk about MIP or MIP labeling, with MIP labeling and unified labeling, I think we use pretty much interchangeably, which is where some of the confusion might come from. What we're talking about there, it's a framework that we talk about when we're talking about the integrations of information protection across the whole platform. So whether talking about, Adobe support for protected PDFs, or whether we're talking about the integration with MCAS or SharePoint or Microsoft Defender ATP, all these different components. When we talk about this across the platform, we don't generally refer to it as AIP. We talk about it more broadly as being an MIP feature. Hopefully that's clarified any confusion you might have around those terms. If not, do please put a question in the chat window, and I'm sure the team can help further. But with that, let's move on. So we just step through these animations. We've had a lot of announcements in the last year, and what we're working on this year. There's a lot of development in the information protection space. Now, the bold bullets on this page are specifically our AIP focus areas. Everything else falls under that MIP label I just talked about before. Now, by the end of this year, it's expected that things will become a lot more easier for our admins and our customers and a lot more straightforward, because with the development we're planning to do, we'll be a lot closer to feature parity with the features built in natively into the Office products. And customers should be in a position where they're managing labels and policies from the Security and Compliance Center, and ideally a single platform, single portal, and not potentially in Azure and in SCC, which I'll talk more about as we go through. So lots of good stuff coming would be the short summary there, and you can read this faster than I can read these out to you. So the next question becomes, great, there's all this really nice development out there, but why should I move to unified labeling? There's obviously going to be some effort from your part to do that, and there needs to be a justification. And there's two main reasons you want to do this. If you haven't already moved to unified labeling, you don't want to delay if you can help it, but you should certainly be planning for this. And the first reason is all the new features that we develop, you will need your labels and policies in the Security and Compliance Center, because it's where all these new features look for those settings. If you're using the classic client and you're managing in the Azure portal, it's not going to bubble up and it won't be available. And the first way customers tend to notice this is we released capabilities for Office for Mac last year. If you'd not configured in the Security and Compliance Center, they weren't getting those labels because you need to do some stuff first, and we'll talk about that as we go through. So if you want the new features, you want to be able to take Office on Mac or mobile, or some of the new features coming in SharePoint and Exchange Online, you really want to be in that space to be able to leverage it. So that's the first big reason. We want to make sure that as we move forward, you're coming with us. And the second one is, we've effectively got 3 clients today. We've got 2 add-ins. We've got the built-in functionality in Office. That's a lot of stuff to manage. It's confusing for customers. We need to simplify this equation a lot more. We need to make this easier. So part of that is we're going to plan on sunsetting the management of labels and policies from the Azure portal. We're also going to sunset the Azure Information Protection Classic add-in, and we expect that to occur during the 2021 timeframe. So you've got plenty of time. It's not kind of being ambushed, and it's not going to be this calendar year, but it's definitely something you want to start planning for. And to point out, when we talk about the 3 clients, we're talking specifically on the Windows platform here. The native or built into Office story, that's the cross-platform. There is no add-in on those platforms. The add-ins are only available on Windows. Hopefully that's not confused things further. Okay, so that's why you want to move to unified labeling. So let's talk about a bit more on what we've delivered recently. And when we talk about what we announced at Ignite recently in November last year, you can now see that from a cross-platform perspective, all the major platforms are now supported in some form for information protection. And you can see we GA'd manual classification built in natively to the Office application. That's version 19.10. We released that back in November last year. We've got information protection is currently in preview in Office for the web and SharePoint Online. And also with the new version of Edge, which is based on Chromium, we'll support opening the new ISO standard of protected PDFs in the browser, and it'll display the information so you can see the label that's been set. And you can test this today if you're having a look at the developer or preview builds of Edge. So you can have a look and see if that works for your organization right now. So lots of great development coming, either in preview or generally available right now. So I just mentioned this before with the release of Office version 1910. This is now available in the monthly channel for Office. It's coming to semi-annual channel soon. We've now got native manual labeling and protection built into the product, nothing to install. And this is great because it means there's no add-in, we get performance increase. What we don't have is the auto labeling, but that's already in preview, so that's on its way as well. So this is just a look at what the native labeling or the built-in labeling looks like in Office right now. You can see there's some visual differences between the experience that's built in and the add-in experience. And we're comparing the unified labeling add-in here because that's where the similarities are. And you can see that we display the document's classification and the status bar at the bottom. If the document's protected, this little icon will actually look like a padlock. The main thing to note here is there's no toolbar across the top. Now, screen real estate is really critical when we're talking about cross-platform and cross-form factor. So we're talking about, phone, tablets, laptops, desktops. The size of the screen really does vary. So a toolbar is a really challenging thing. If that is something that's super important to your organization, do please let us know on the Yammer channel. And that's something, we want to keep an eye on. So this is the web version of the Word. This feature is actually in preview right now. You can actually opt into this if you opt into the SharePoint preview. I have a link at the back of the deck in the resources. When you opt into the SharePoint preview, it will light up information protection across all the web apps as well. But you can see here, it's the same experience. We have the sensitivity button in the ribbon. It's the same look and feel. And again, Excel for the web. You get the message here, right? It's a consistent interface so that we're not putting your end users into something that's different and uncomfortable for them. We're trying to make it consistent and easy to use. So OWA, which is generally available, we released this just prior to Ignite last year. And again, same look and feel. I don't want to harp on that, so I'll move on. And then lastly, Outlook mobile experience. Of course, it's a much smaller form factor, so the behavior is adjusted slightly, but as you can see, the same features and they're easily accessible. So that's what we've delivered so far. What are we working on this year? What's important? What do you need to be excited about? This will just look like a normal screenshot for anyone that's been using AIP for some period of time, but in preview today is support for auto labeling. This is built into Office, Mac, and the web. It's the same experience you're familiar with, which is why the screen looks so familiar. Now we're talking about when we have recommended and automatically for applying those labels. In this example, you can see we've triggered a recommended condition. And if you click on the Change Now button, this is where you'll start to see a bit of a behavior change. Because we're natively built into the product, we can start to actually improve the experience. So what we're looking at the moment is currently providing a better experience when we match against those automatic rules. Here you can see a recommendation trigger, and there's now an option to have a look at, show me that sensitive information. And then we get the editor experience pop out, and we can see a much richer experience where we say, hey, these are the sensitive keywords that were triggered. We can look at the condition that caused that, and we can say either remove these sensitive words because I don't need them, or I'm going to keep them, and then because it's a recommended, you can decide whether you're going to accept that recommendation or not. This has been a big area of feedback for us. Customers are saying, well, it's great having this automation, but the end user doesn't necessarily know why they're being asked to change the label, and so this is something we're looking at. Now, to point out here, this is all planned for all the Office applications, but the features will arrive at different times. The reason for this is really simple. Word already has this edit functionality, so it's super easy to plug this in. But for example, Excel doesn't today, so it's going to take them some time to catch up and build this in. But cool stuff. So last year at Ignite, we introduced sensitivity label support for SharePoint sites. That went into preview. We're extending this support to Office 365 groups and teams as well. So when you create a group or team, you can now simply select the sensitivity label and you'll get some associated richer policies you can apply to that whole container. This support is currently in public preview, and you can see a URL on the left-hand side there, aka.ms/splabelnews, and you can have a look at that. One thing to bear in mind is when you apply a label at the container level, like a SharePoint site, this doesn't mean that all the files created or uploaded into that site will automatically be labeled with that sensitivity label. This is more around the DLP controls. If you want new files to have a specific label, you could accomplish this with the new SharePoint auto labeling capability that we have in preview, and I'll touch on that a little bit more as we step through. Okay, so here's some features that I personally think are super exciting. This is the new unified analytics dashboard in the security and compliance portal. You can see there it's under the data classification section. So here is where the data from what you see today in the AIP analytics portal will be surfaced. We've introduced some new tooling to help improve the experience. I think it's really cool. Hopefully you will as well. This is where obviously you'll go to understand your label usage across your organization, what labels are being used the most, what's happening to your sensitive data, is it being copied, shared externally, has a label been changed? So, all those kind of key questions that you want to know around how do I know my data, we will bubble that up in this section. So this is a great summary of state of your data. On the overview screen, you can see all the key data points without having to kind of go drilling into things. We get a really nice summary there. You may notice that we're getting data from the endpoint as well on this screen. This is being bubbled up through our Defender ATP's new DLP agent. That's currently in preview. But the data classification section is going to be really key to understanding what's going on with your data. Just underneath the title there, you can see we've got some tabs, and I'll talk briefly about a couple of those as well. But it is in preview, so this is something, if it was me and I was outside the organization, I'd want to have a look at this. So the first one is Content Explorer. This is where you can get insight into the amount of sensitive data in specific documents and what triggered that classification. And you can filter the view and really slice and dice that to get a look at what it is you want to look at. And in this screen, you can see we're looking across the SharePoint tenant, and we're looking at the list of all confidentially labeled documents and the sensitive information types that we've identified within those documents. And on the right-hand side, there's access to looking at the metadata of the document, and you can also see there's a preview there as well. Now, we do acknowledge there's sensitive information available here. We do have RBAC controls available around this part of the website, just to make sure it's only the right admins have access to this level of detail. There's some cool stuff here. The next one is Activity Explorer. This gives us insight into the document level activities, things like label changes, if the label's been downgraded, if someone's moved it from confidential to general. This gives us a view across all locations. This is a really great tool in understanding that the policies you configured are behaving as you expect them to. So it's a great sanity check. You go look at the behavior you're seeing here and see if that meets your expectations. If it doesn't, you can then go and refine those policies and change as appropriate. And we've got a tool coming up that can help with that as well. So on this screen, you can see we've got a summary. This is an example of data that's been filtered on date range. It's looking for JPEG and PNG files specifically that have been copied to USB or uploaded to a third-party cloud. But you can do this across the broader MIP stories we've done in the past as well. But this is just a specific example around some of the cool things you can do that are coming when we start integrating data from those broader sources. So the last feature I want to talk about is the SharePoint Online Auto Labeling. Now, we did touch on this briefly before, but here you can see the policies we've defined under the Information Protection solution in the Security Compliance Center. One of the new features that I think is super helpful here for admins is this thing we call in test mode at the moment. This helps you as an admin define the policy you think is correct, and then you actually test it before applying it to real data. So we'll go off and we'll model that, and we'll come back, and as you can see here, we'll give you a whole bunch of information around what would have happened. And one of the great things I like about this is you can see just on this page alone how many items that would have affected. You don't really want to go out and affect 100,000 files unless you're 100% confident the settings you've got are just right. And as you can see in this example, we're looking at US financial data policy. We get to see a match, and if we drill into that, we get this page here where we can get a lot more information around what's occurring with that policy, or what would occur with that policy. Now, the beauty here is you can have a look at what it we've done, and if that's unexpected and isn't what you thought was going to happen, you can go back, edit the policy, you can refine those settings, run the test mode again, and you can kind of rinse and repeat until you get the outcome you were expecting or you're comfortable with, and then you can go and make that policy happen. So we've kind of got this safety net in place to make things a much more easier and less risk for you when applying your policies. So some cool tools there, I think, in my opinion. Just pause here for a moment. We've touched on a number of our preview programs so far. We've got one I've not mentioned, which is be able to apply label to Exchange Online while data is moving around your emails. We've got SharePoint Online for data at rest, and some other features as well. This is a good link to click on or use the QR code if you want to have a look at any of those as we're moving forward. One of my favorites, especially as we have Dennis on the call as well, is the new and improved AIP Unified Labeling Scanner. Obviously, other than just updating it to look for the Security and Compliance Center for its settings, there's also some really cool features here. You can easily scale it out with additional scanner servers. You can deploy dozens of scanner servers and use a single profile and let us worry about the load distribution. There's improvements to the auto labeling options. We can use custom types and then some advanced conditions. And we've also made improvements to the relabeling approach as well. So some really cool features there. I'm a huge fan of Scanner because it's a critical piece in scanning that data at rest before you move it to the cloud. It's great we can do stuff when it's in the cloud, but you've already kind of moved at that point. So this is super important for your file shares and SharePoint on-prem. So really great to see this in preview. This should GA later on this quarter. So we've touched on a lot of areas at the moment. But what I want to look at the moment is just migrating those labels to unified labeling, so the activation process. And we'll actually just step through some screens just to help you become familiar if you've not already done this. And then we'll touch on some client gaps shortly after that. So we're in the Security and Compliance portal. It's clean. There's no sensitive labels at this point. If you're new to information protection, if you've not deployed AIP, the great news is nothing to do. You can kind of ignore me for 5 minutes and you would just go and create your labels and your policy here and you're away. Great. At that point, you just want to decide which client to use, but we'll talk around some options around that shortly. For those of you that are in AIP and potentially haven't activated your unified labeling at this point, you'd click on the Go to the Azure portal. And this should be a familiar view to anybody who's been working with AIP for some time. What you're interested in here is in the left-hand column down the bottom, we have the unified labeling. And when you click on that, we get this screen. So obviously, this isn't very complicated. We'll click on the Activate button. We'll walk through the next few screens, but the main thing I want to call out here is activating unified labeling doesn't break anything. Right? There's no adverse effect here. It doesn't introduce unexpected behavior, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. But basically, you want to click the Activate button, click Yes to proceed, and then you'll get this in progress message, which should only last for a few minutes. And then after that, you'll get a summary of how the migration went. And as you can see here, everything was successful. You get information to show you what's going on. And then if we go back to the Security and Compliance Center, you can see that now you see the same labels as you did before. Now, the important thing to call out here is we've not created a policy. So this doesn't have an adverse effect. And I think I'll talk more about that in the next slide. Now, the migration process is generally available. Okay, so that feature is in GA, that works, it works fine. Currently, we have in preview the ability to copy your policies from Azure to SEC. So this is the bit that's new and it's currently in preview. As you can see, as we step through this, it's a very similar process to what you'd have just gone through before with the activate unified labeling. We click yes. We get an in progress, and you can see the notification in the top corner there. And again, shouldn't take very long, and you'll get a summary again. So once you look back at the SCC portal, you can see here now we've got a new policy. We only had the one policy in Azure. It's copied that across. Obviously, the best practice here is you want to go in and look at that policy, make sure that everything looks as intended, but also there's slightly different settings in the Azure portal versus what's available in SCC. So you probably want to have a look if there's any new settings that you want to apply at that point, and that you're comfortable with the settings there, and then away you go. Strategic guidance. So we've talked a lot around all these new features, what's coming, how you can activate unified labeling. But that can still be quite confusing. What's the right thing for you to do depending on your environment? How do you move forward? So we've tried to break this as simply as possible, and we've put it in broadly into 3 options. So option 1, strategic. This is the place where you want to be, realistically, right? It may not be practical for your organization today. Totally appreciate that, but this is the desired state. This is where you should be planning to be. And ideally, this is using the unified labeling features built into the products as we release them, where we release them. So this gives you a consistent cross-platform support in Office. You don't have any add-in to deploy. You can take advantage of the performance improvements. One of the concerns that our customers have is that the add-in may be disabled. That can't occur here. Of course, right now, today, the downside is you need to be on the monthly channel because you need 1910 or above. So that's going to be a bit challenge for some of our customers for the first half of this year. And also, there's no auto labeling. It's in preview, but it's not there right now. But this is strategically, once we get the additional features made generally available, ideally, this is the world you want to be in, because as we release new features, you're going to be able to take advantage of them, and the overhead for management is a lot less. So utopia, which is where we want to be. If you can't do that today, though, here is your second option. And this is option number 2. We've called this tactical. It may be because you're not using Office Pro Plus, or it might be just for the isolated pockets of machines in your environment that can't be on Pro Plus and are on perpetual versions of Office. Bear in mind, this also includes the perpetual version of Office 2019, which sounds new and shiny, but the information protection features are not built in to that product. Now, of course, the main thing you want to do here is activate unified labeling, so that on the Windows estate, you're leveraging the same configuration portal SEC as your cross-platform story. If you're using Mac or mobile or the web, it means you've got a single portal to manage everything from, which is ideally where you want to be. Ideally not be managing things in Azure and Security and Compliance Center. Of course, the downside is you still need to be updating the add-in. It may still be disabled, and the experience isn't as deeply integrated as we saw. We've got some really nice features coming around that. It will remain the same experience as we have today. And then option 3, which is probably where a lot of our customers are right now, is what we're calling the classic option. This is where you've got the classic AIP add-in on Windows. What you can do is activate that unified labeling, and so you can take advantage of new features in Mac, Android, iOS, on the web, as we introduce them into SharePoint Exchange and other products as well. So you are getting that advantage. However, the client you're on and the management portal you're going to have to use, which is a 2-portal approach, we are planning to deprecate those features. So it's fine to be on them right now, but this is really not where you want to be at the end of this year. If you want to start planning, great, but strive for option 2 or option 1. It's fine to be on option 3 today, but this is not where you want to be from a strategic perspective. I can't emphasize that enough. Okay, and just briefly, just to round out, we'll talk around, well, what happens when I click the activated unified labeling button? What does it actually do? Because this causes some confusion with our customers as well. So on this screen, on the left-hand side, we have the Azure portal. We have the AIP admin managing through the Azure portal. We've got the store where the label and policy configuration is, and then we've got users at the top. So that's the purple side. On the blue side, we've got the Security and Compliance Center, and we've kind of got the broader MIP kind of vision, if you like. Now, that's kind of your option 3 we're just talking around there. And as you can see, that's kind of busy. It's not really where you want to be. So the first thing you do when you click Activate Unified Labeling is you see a little label move across. Now, this is not a copy feature. We move the label configuration from Azure to Security and Compliance. So there's no synchronization. There's no, oh, you know, I might have this label here, but not there. We move the store. But then, so it doesn't break things, we put that little hook in between Security and Compliance Center and the Azure portal. So if any AIP Classic clients go and ask for their list of labels, we fetch that for them on your behalf in the background there in the service. So what we get is a single source of truth for labels. For policies, because there are different settings, you now have 2 policy locations. So the policy will stay in the Azure portal for your Classic clients, and you'll need to create a new one in Security and Compliance to light up all those new features for you. So that's step 1. And then realistically, if you're looking at moving forward, you want to upgrade your clients. And we appreciate this is not a 5-minute activity. You know, I used to be in end user computing. I used to manage the endpoints. I totally sympathize for the fact, you know, you're talking about a core application, and this is something you need to update on every machine. So that's going to take some time, whether that be weeks or months, but there's going to be a period there where you're migrating the clients and you're moving to, you know, ideally the unified labeling add-in, or if you're in a position where you can, you know, you're adopting the native features built into Office. Great. Once that's complete, it's just jumped. Apologies for that. There we go. Once it's complete, you no longer have clients that are looking to the Azure portal for anything, which means you don't need to be an admin for that portal. Which means you're now in this world, which is, you can appreciate, is a lot simpler, and it's where you want to be, and that's the kind of goal moving forward. Now, as I mentioned before, if you're new to AIP, if you're new to information protection in general, and you've not deployed AIP, this is kind of your world to start with, and out of the gate, things are much simpler for you. But I'm assuming the majority of the attendees on this conference are not in that boat, and that you're probably really interested in, well, how do I move forward? So that, again, is your strategic view. Option 1 is where we end up. So last, I just want to touch briefly on, okay, I think you guys have got the message loud and clear. You want to be moving forward. But if you're on the Classic client today, and the strategic option 1 isn't something you can do in the next 6 months, it potentially means you've got a stepping stone you're going to have to do first, which is, you know, move to the unified labeling client, the add-in. So here's a bit of information just to give you some picture around what that means for you today. As we talked about before, we've got about 90% of the features across at the moment. All the key features that customers have been calling us about. Now, there are a couple that may not be in here that are applicable to you. Again, that Yammer channel is ideally where you want to raise that. We do have some new features coming to the AIP Unified Labeling add-in, as you can see there, including the scanner we talked about before. One of the things that get called out a lot is the fact that we ship all the logs now centrally, so there's nothing stored in the Windows event log. For some of our customers, that's a pain point, so that will come in the latter half, the first half this year, Q2. And then the 2 main things that have been holding customers on the Classic client is hold your own key. The message I would have there is, if you're not currently using hold your own key, this is probably not a desirable direction for you. So this is really aimed at customers that are on hold your own key for some parts of their organization. We do have a new feature to help those customers specifically move forward. We have a preview for that this quarter, and we expect a public preview later on this year. And the other one is track and revoke, which is really interesting because the usage of this globally is super low, but customers equate this to their fire alarm. May not use it every day, but it's that safety net. It's useful there. A lot of the track capabilities we're starting to surface up through our analytics anyway, but we are looking at something, as you can see here, for the information workers or end users to do revoke. So that's coming. And then the last section is just calling out some specific things that we do not plan to put in the unified labeling add-in. So if you see something on this list that's super critical for you and important to you, then please do let us know. We'd like to understand specifically, what that means to you and why, and we can have a conversation around that. So lots of information. I know this session is probably a bit shorter than usual, hoping the quality more so than the duration. There's some resources here at the back. I know Dennis and Nia, at the very least, I've been on the chat channel answering your questions like mad. The SharePoint integration, I talked about the preview a few times there. That's the link at the bottom. The rest are all pretty self-explanatory. I will pause here and let Dennis and Nia jump in and see if there's anything that they want to explain further based off what's been coming up in the questions.
And I think that we covered everything on the questions that were raised. I don't see any major thing that we need to reiterate here. I think it was pretty clear. Thank you very much, Adam.
Excellent. Okay, thanks, Dennis. So if there's no further questions, thank you everyone for your time today. We will follow up. We will post the webinar. We'll look at making the deck available. Hopefully this was of value to you. And the message has come across loud and clear, and we've given you plenty of notice of where you need to be and ideally how you can go around that. And we'll leave it with you. Please do come and join our Yammer community. As I said, the team are on there. We have lots of customers on there. It will help you if you have questions. And we'll have lots more of these webinars coming up. I know there's some more. So I know Mavi has been mentioning these on LinkedIn. We'll be putting them out on Twitter. So at MIP News, I think, is our Twitter account. Hopefully we'll see you more of these. And thank you for your time today. Have a great day.